Hello YouTubers. I'd like to introduce you to my new-ish channel here, in which I am going to be reviewing and ranking pieces of media in relation to new things coming out this year and beyond. If you are coming from my sister channel, Matt's Musical Mashes, the reason I've separated the two is because in that channel I'm pairing musicals, songs with shows, and that is the kind of thing that the YouTube gods often like to come down and cancel a channel for. So just in case that happens, I've decoupled the two. So if my sister channel gets canceled and shut down, it does mean that this channel with my regular reviews will not be affected. For my reviewing style, I'm going to be doing something a little different than a standard review, one that I think is really cool, that it combines a kind of structured narrative, systematic approach, along with a kind of tier list review approach. And what I mean by that is that for these reviews, I'll be utilizing ideas from A Nature of Order, which are actually architectural tenets from an architect named Christopher Alexander, that posits that humans like things that have certain structures, are ordered, and make sense in specific kind of ways, and make us feel comfortable and all right and at peace and like that kind of stuff. And pairing this idea with narrative, I first saw in a game developers conference talk in 2018. The talk itself was actually done by a professor I went to school with. And I've linked that talk in the description, and it basically utilizes these 10 tenets for a narrative approach. Now, these tenets, in order, are levels of scale. That's about how we like interacting with things that are different variety of sizes, small, medium, and big, and we can see changes in these scales. So in narrative, you talk about characters moving from a larger encompassed area to a smaller, the fact of how micro elements of dialogue can interact with the highest elements of narrative, that kind of moving around different levels of scale. Then we have strong centers. We are interested in things like the solar system or atoms that just have centered. And narrative, there are often narrative centers to a story that can be represented by literal things. You can argue like the Death Star in Star Wars would be a strong center. The strong center can be a theme, it can be a character, that kind of stuff. And then we have boundaries, and boundaries often border the strong centers. And these can be physical or thematic boundaries, and usually in narrative these boundaries need to be crossed in some way in order for change to occur to the strong center or for the characters that are surrounding it. And then we have alternating repetition. In this, we like going back and forth, like falling and rising tension, flow in a story, A plots, B plots, checkerboard patterns in those plots. That is pleasing to the mind. And then we have positive space, and there's an interplay between positive and negative. That can be in positive emotions versus negative emotions, good versus evil, which is also related to contrast, which comes later. But deep positive, it can also be aesthetics as well in positive space. And then we have good shape. We like shapes that are not trying to be pretty, but through their inherent purpose, they make pleasing shapes. And that can be like a sail catching the wind, or characters that take different emotional or mental shapes as they evolve over the course of the narrative. And then local symmetries. Our brains are programmed to spot tiny symmetries in our bodies between characters in a story, symbols, motifs, even minuscule stuff that feel connected, even if globally they're not, but we create these connections, and that also is pleasing. And then we have deep interlock, that we like feeling that things are interconnected, that things which happened ages ago that felt meaningless at the time have some significance, and that or like characters you meet in Act 1 all of a sudden come back in Act 3, sort of interplay between stories. In a game design, that would be mechanics and how they interact with each other. The different themes, all that interactivity between the space. and without which the feeling starts to fall apart. Then we have contrast, which is connected to positive space. That means positive and negative space together. And we can perceive two things brought together in unexpected ways, or in certain narratives you can have a thing like comedy that occurs after tragedy and then that ends up enhancing it somehow. Pixar is an expert at this. The idea of sort of laughing through your tears, kind of. This contrast done to absolute excellence. And then graded variation, this regards to things changing over time. Usually in my reviews, I focus on sort of how characters change the world. And graded variation usually focuses on that macro scale stuff, things that we can't spot instantaneously, but when we look back at them, we realize that change has happened between now and then. And then roughness is very specifically character-based. We do not want characters and things that are 100% smooth. We like imperfect things, and perfect things feel human, real, and natural in their messiness. And then echoes, that's a character, the world, the theme. Each one thing echoes the other, and then that builds on each other and makes them feel even stronger. Then the void, oftentimes the most important things are in empty spaces, or in certain narratives you have some kind of worldwide threat, or some kind of thing that threatens to take away a thing, that threatens the absence of something, and that absence is the true danger. Or you can have a character that becomes empty by the end, or something of that effect. A void is often connected with danger in some way. And then intercom, we are not given all the information at once. This often has to do with emergent narratives, emergent complexities that just come out through natural tension. So you don't want to pump the tension really high in Act 1, because that almost then starts to feel unnatural, but that emergent development then just feels natural and human, and we like it without even noticing it. And then last is not separateness, and we just like the feeling that pieces, even if they're physically separate, are actually not. And if you take one piece away, the other suffers. So you take Game of Thrones, which there's 12 different plots going on simultaneously, but at least in the earlier seasons, the world still feels connected, because even if characters and things are physically separate, they're not. And a story that can do this very excellently, again, humans just like it. So those are the 15 tenets, and I actually have done reviews utilizing these tenets on my written website, which is linked in the description. I used these tenets to review the first 3 Paper Mario games, so if you want to head over there and read them, feel free. But of course those are games, and the focus of this channel is going to be on movies and television shows. The first review that I'll do, which is way overdue, I wanted to release something on the Super Mario Brothers movie back in the spring, and a bunch of stuff got in the way, but I still think it's relevant, and given that much of my work on my written website pertains to Mario, that's will be my first review. And then after, I want to do reviews on shows, things that have sort of culminating things happening in the next several months. So the Miyazaki movie coming out in December, and the Attack on Titan finale coming out next month, that kind of stuff. And for these reviews, for each one of the tenets, I'm going to give the movie or show a ranking on that tenet, and that's where kind of a tier list thing comes into play. And this idea I actually got from YouTuber Chris Ranks, who did some really excellent color-based reviews on the seasons of Game of Thrones back in 2019 in preparation for the last season. And sort of like his reviews, my rankings are going to come with different colors. And then after all the different tenets, I'm going to proverbially add all those colors up and then make a judgment call on what kind of overall ranking the movie or show deserves. So then that finally brings us to the colors that you'll see me giving to these tenets. And from worst to best, it starts with black. That is almost like think blood that's corroded and just turned accurate, that kind of feeling. And I don't even think I've ever given a black to even any of the stuff I've seen. Like, black is some of the worst I've ever seen. Like, you were talking about, like, something that's so bad you wonder how this thing even got made, like that kind of bad. Red is not as bad as black. Black is, black is what you walk out of the theater. It's that bad. Red is not that bad, but it leaves a very bitter, poor taste in your mouth for a while, even after finishing the movie or the show. Like, it's that level bad. And it will color the entire experience, basically. It is still that bad. So then orange is the next color up. Orange is not as bad as red, and not necessarily automatically so bad that it brings the entire movie down, but bad enough that you remember it. Like, orange, I often get oranges out in movies or shows that are often good overall movies or shows, and then it's sometimes weird when you see just some really bad decision in one of these tenets that sticks out like a sore thumb, and that ends up feeling very like an orange. And then next up is yellow. Yellow is just regular that was subpar. So not necessarily outright bad. You'll see yellows here and there, and plenty of tenets of just like, oh yeah, that wasn't very good, but not so much that it brings down the entire experience, unless it's not going to add anything to it. But you'll need a lot of yellows intermixed with worse things to make a outright bad product. Then next up is white. White is average. Maybe the tenet was not really used at all, or maybe it's kind of haphazard and the flaws or pros balance out. But white is like, it has no real memory on you after viewing. Like, it sounds like, oh right, that, and then you just kind of move on. And then green is next. Green is good. Green means it's not really anything special, and maybe not that much of it either, but it means it's just done pretty decently. Blue is next. That means done very, very well. That means full-on pro tenet, really enhances the experience. You might see several blues, like if you watch a movie or show, like, a pretty decent movie will often have at least something that is blue that really stands out and leaves a positive impact on you. And then next is purple. That means basically practically perfect, leaves a high positive impact on you afterward. This is the kind of stuff that you can be watching shows or movies afterward, and you'll still be remembering that purple from the previous thing you watched. You think about the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones, there are a lot of, like, the not separateness is a purple. Some of the most expertly crafted balancing of that many plots that one has ever seen, and that's purple. Then beyond purple is rainbow. And rainbow I keep very exclusive. Basically means that like 1 out of every 100 movies, if not less, might have a rainbow in a tenet. Like, rainbow is the kind of thing you might see once, and then that will remain the greatest thing, at least for that tenet, that you've ever seen. And it will then stay like that. There's a lot of rainbow in, say, Lord of the Rings, for me, personally. So rainbow is the kind of thing you see when you're 15, and then decades later is still the best ever for whichever tenet that it applies to. So those are the colors that I will be applying to these reviews, and I look forward to making them. I'll be doing more rankings as more interesting things come out over the next several months. Hope you all enjoy, and let's have fun with it. Cheers.